She was only 6 years old, and the German Shepherd pup barely 3 months. One had a heart too tender for this world, the other had known nothing but its cruelty. Rain fell in cold sheets as the girl paused beside a rusted trash bin. A sound so faint it could have been the wind, until it whimpered again. Inside a broken body. A pair of eyes that had stopped hoping. What the little girl did next, it didn't just save a life. It awakened something long forgotten in an entire town. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and if you believe that even a whisper for help deserves to be heard, hit that subscribe button. This story. This one will stay with you long after it ends. Willow Springs was the kind of town where time didn't rush. Nestled between gentle hills and blanketed with the scent of pine, it was a place where front porches still held rocking chairs, and people waved from their mailboxes. But today the town was quiet, its streets washed clean by a late autumn storm that had only just ended. The air smelled of wet leaves and damp earth. Water dripped steadily from the park's wrought iron benches, and the clouds still hung low, reluctant to leave. Puddles glistened like glass reflecting the old lamp-posts lining the winding path of Willow Park. It was here on this pale gray morning that 6-year-old Ellie Palmer walked with her grandmother, a red umbrella bobbing between them like a cautious heartbeat. Ellie was a peculiar child in the most wonderful way. With honey-blonde curls that bounced around her face and wide hazel eyes that seemed to absorb the world, instead of merely looking at it, she moved through life as if each leaf whispered secrets just for her. Small for her age, she often wore a hand-knit green cardigan that swallowed her arms, a gift from her late mother. Ellie didn't speak much to strangers, but when she did, her words were careful, thoughtful, like each one mattered. And perhaps for Ellie they did. Walking beside her, holding the umbrella, was Martha Palmer, a woman in her early 70s with a face both stern and kind, weathered from time, and softened by loss. Tall and lean, she walked with a slight stoop in her shoulders, not from age but from carrying more weight than her frame was ever meant to. Her gray hair was tied in a practical bun under a woolen cap, and her long tweed coat swayed with each step. Once a schoolteacher, Martha had always been firm, yet fair. Since her daughter passed, she had taken on the role of mother once more, this time to a granddaughter who saw the world with different eyes. Ellie often said that Martha's heart was made of bark, rough on the outside, but hiding rings of warmth and memory within. They were heading home when Ellie suddenly stopped. Her body stiffened and she tilted her head slightly. Martha had come to recognize that look, the pause that meant Ellie heard something others didn't. "What is it?" Martha asked, but Ellie didn't answer right away. She stepped off the path, her small boots splashing through a puddle as she headed toward a green trash bin near the park's edge. Martha followed, brow furrowing. The sound was barely there, a whimper so faint it could have been wind curling through wet branches. But to Ellie it was as clear as a whisper in a library. She crouched beside the trash bin, her eyes narrowing as she peered behind it. There, nestled between the bin and the cold metal fence, was a soggy, half-collapsed cardboard box. And in that box a tiny shape trembled. "Oh," Ellie breathed, reaching forward with gentle fingers. It was a puppy, a German Shepherd no older than 3 months. Its fur, dark along the back and lighter on the belly, was matted with dirt and rain, and its ears drooped limply to the side. One of its front legs was tucked awkwardly beneath its chest, suggesting pain, and its amber eyes flickered open only briefly before squeezing shut again. The little thing was all bones and shivers tucked in on itself, like it wanted to disappear. Martha knelt beside Ellie, taking in the sight. "Good Lord," she murmured instinctively, pulling the edges of her coat tighter against the wind. "Who would leave a creature like this here?" Ellie looked up at her, her lip trembling. "Can we help her?" "She's probably hurt," Martha replied. "Might not survive the day." But then the puppy opened its eyes again just a sliver and looked directly at Martha. Not pleading, not even afraid, just tired. And somehow that gaze reached beyond the cold, beyond the wet, beyond the fence that life had built around Martha's chest. She sighed and pulled off her scarf, gently lifting the puppy into it with Ellie's help. The dog whimpered softly, but didn't resist. Ellie cradled the bundle in her arms like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We'll take her home," Martha said at last, "just for now, until we figure something out." Ellie didn't smile, not exactly, but her eyes lit in that way they did when her heart found something new to love. "Her name's Luna," she whispered, more a declaration than a suggestion. "Luna," Martha echoed. "She's like the moon. All alone, but still shining." Martha didn't argue. They turned back onto the path umbrella, tilting scarf-wrapped puppy held close, and the puddles shimmered beneath their feet like silver stepping stones. The sky had not yet cleared, but something inside the three of them, woman, girl, and pup, had already begun to lighten. The sky remained a pale gray the rest of that afternoon, but the storm had passed. In the small living room of a modest single-story home on Sycamore Lane, warmth flickered from an old gas heater, and the scent of ginger tea drifted through the air. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor, her cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows, watching Luna sleep inside a folded fleece blanket lined with old towels. The puppy's breathing was shallow but steadier now, her tiny frame no longer shivering as violently as before. Martha stood by the kitchen counter, her arms crossed, face unreadable. She watched the scene, Ellie's hand gently stroking the puppy's back the way her granddaughter leaned forward with a kind of reverent attention, and knew she had already lost the argument forming in her head. "This isn't a good idea," she said aloud, more to herself than to Ellie. "We don't know where she came from. She could be sick. She could belong to someone dangerous." Ellie turned her head. Her eyes, wide and sincere, met her grandmother's. "She doesn't have anyone," she said softly. "If she did, they wouldn't have left her like that." Martha exhaled slowly, rubbing her temple. "Just tonight," she finally murmured. "One night. Then we'll figure out the rest." Ellie nodded, a smile blooming on her face, like sunrise after storm clouds. She reached for a small bowl and poured lukewarm water into it, sliding it toward Luna. The puppy blinked once, then sniffed at it hesitantly before lapping a few drops. The house was simple and lived in. The walls bore framed cross-stitch verses and photos from years past, Ellie's mother in a white graduation gown, a younger Martha holding a baby in a hospital bed, a man in military dress, Ellie's grandfather long gone now. In the corner sat a shelf of dog-eared books, and near the hallway door was a faded coat rack with only 2 hooks in use. That night, Martha made Ellie a small bowl of macaroni and cheese, while she herself nursed a cup of chamomile tea. The two of them ate quietly in the soft yellow kitchen light. Luna, too weak to move far, remained curled on her blanket, occasionally lifting her head when she heard footsteps, but never barking. Her silence was not normal for a pup that young. It was the kind of quiet that came from fear, the kind that grew from being ignored for too long. After dinner, Martha cleaned the space near Ellie's bed and laid down more blankets for Luna. Ellie changed into her flannel pajamas, her tiny feet padding across the hardwood floor. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers to her chin, but immediately slipping one arm over the edge, hand resting near Luna's ear. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Ellie whispered. Martha knelt beside the makeshift bed, brushing a strand of hair from Ellie's forehead. "She'll need time, and care, and maybe some help from a vet if she doesn't improve by morning." Ellie looked down at the pup. She's scared, I can feel it. Not just in her body, but in here. She touched her chest gently just over her heart. Martha sighed, the sound soft like paper folding. You always did feel things deeper than most. The lamp was turned off, and the room dimmed to blue and gray. The only sounds were the ticking of a clock, and the slow, even breathing of the two sleepers, 3 if you counted the heartbeat of a pup, learning the rhythm of safety. But Ellie didn't sleep easily. Her dreams were painted in the colors of the storm that had passed. She wandered through a forest of tall pines, their trunks slick with rain, their leaves dripping. The world around her was quiet, the ground soft and dark beneath her bare feet. Then, through the veil of mist, she saw Luna, not the curled, injured version in the real world, but standing tall and dry beneath a shaft of moonlight. The pup looked older in the dream, though no bigger. She didn't speak, but Ellie understood. Luna's gaze was filled with something pure, unspoken gratitude, trust, and a longing not to be left behind again. The girl reached forward, but before her fingers touched the pup's damp fur, the dream dissolved like mist in morning sun. Ellie awoke to find Luna sleeping just inches from her outstretched hand. In the stillness of the room, a single sigh escaped the puppy's nose, and her tiny body pressed closer into the fold of the blanket. In the other room, Martha stood in the hallway watching through the crack of the door. She hadn't slept much. She couldn't forget the image of that little creature helpless and trembling, and Ellie's unwavering faith that love could heal something broken. Martha knew how grief could build a fence around the heart, but perhaps, just perhaps, Luna was a little piece of the world's apology, for the things lost, for the holes left behind. She returned to the kitchen and wrote a short note on the fridge, "Call Dr. Clay tomorrow." Just one night. But something in her already knew it wouldn't be just one. The sun rose gently over Willow Springs, casting a golden hue on the puddles left by yesterday's storm. Steam drifted from the roofs of modest homes as the morning chill began to lift. Inside the kitchen on Sycamore Lane, Martha poured warm milk into a ceramic mug and glanced at the small bundle curled beneath Ellie's desk. Luna was still asleep, her little belly rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Ellie sat cross-legged nearby, cradling her sketchbook, drawing the shape of a German shepherd with wide, cautious eyes. Martha ran a hand through her short, silver hair tied back into a low ponytail and sighed. "Put your shoes on, Elle. We're going to see Dr. Clay." The name sparked something in Ellie. The animal doctor, Martha nodded. She'll know how to help Luna. If we're keeping her even for now, we're going to do it right. A short drive later, they pulled into the gravel lot beside a small wooden building that bore the sign Willow Springs Veterinary Clinic, Susan Clay, DVM. Flower beds lined the path, though they were half drowned by the previous night's rain. Inside, the waiting area was warmly lit, filled with the scent of pine disinfectant and something faintly floral. A sleepy orange cat dozed in a basket behind the reception desk. Dr. Susan Clay emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on a towel. She was in her mid-50s, tall and lean with weather-worn features. Her hair was a mix of silver and ash brown, pulled back into a loose bun. Her expression was one of calm attentiveness, the kind developed after decades of listening more to animals than people. "Well, what do we have here?" she said softly, kneeling as Ellie placed Luna's blanket-lined box on the floor. Susan peered into the bundle, and her brow creased with quiet concern. "This is Luna," Ellie said proudly, though her voice trembled a bit. Martha added, "We found her yesterday in the park. She's been quiet, but alert." Susan lifted Luna gently from the box, her practiced fingers checking along joints, ribs, ears. She's underweight, but no broken bones. A little bruising and some superficial scratches. She pulled a stethoscope from her coat pocket and listened to Luna's chest. "Heart sounds good." Breathing is thin but regular. What she needs most is rest, food, and safety. Susan's tone was reassuring, but her eyes lingered on the pup's ear. She gently adjusted it, then frowned. There's something here. Using a small handheld light, she illuminated the inner flap of Luna's left ear. Faintly visible beneath the dirt and grime was a pale gray smudge, no bigger than a postage stamp. It's a tattoo, Susan muttered. Very faint, almost faded. What does it mean? Ellie asked, stepping closer. Susan's voice dropped. It's common in illegal dog trafficking rings. They mark puppies when they're born or taken too young. Usually numbers, sometimes letters. They brand them for tracking trading. Martha's breath caught. You mean she was... Susan nodded slowly. There's no microchip. But this tells me someone used her. Maybe bred from a stolen litter, or worse, sold for trainin' or bait. Ellie looked down at Luna, who had curled into herself under the vet's table, ears drooping. But she's safe now, right? Susan placed a comforting hand on Ellie's shoulder. She is. You did something brave by finding her. They stayed for another 30 minutes while Susan cleaned Luna's ears, applied salve to her small cuts, and gave her a vitamin shot. Ellie never left Luna's side. She hummed softly, tracing the edge of her cardigan sleeve, whispering things only Luna could hear. While Luna rested under a heat lamp in the corner, Susan invited Martha to sit by her cluttered desk. The doctor poured herself a cup of peppermint tea and sipped slowly, her eyes heavy with thought. I remember a similar case last spring, she began. A German Shepherd pup, maybe 4 months old, came in after being dumped near the rail tracks. Same kind of mark in the ear, same kind of silence. These animals come from broken chains. Someone is supplying them. Martha's lips tightened. Do you think it's still happening? Susan nodded. I can't say for sure. But if Luna was branded, she was part of something bigger. And someone might be looking for her not with love, but control. Back in the car, Ellie cradled Luna in her arms like a fragile treasure. The pup was still tired, but there was a flicker of response in her gaze when Ellie whispered her name. That night, Martha washed the towels and added another blanket to Luna's spot. She left a bowl of soft food mixed with rice, which Luna finally began nibbling. Ellie stayed beside her again, fingers lightly brushing behind her ears. Martha stood in the doorway. She watched the two of them in that quiet moment, and despite her lingering worry, something gentle bloomed in her chest. A trust, not just in Luna, but in her granddaughter's heart. The morning sun crept over Willow Springs with a deceptive gentleness, spreading honeyed light across the town's old rooftops and quiet porches. But inside the hearts of those who had begun to care for Luna, a quiet tension was beginning to stir. At the veterinary clinic, Dr. Susan Clay sat by her desk, fingers drumming lightly against a manila folder. The faint tattoo in Luna's ear had haunted her thoughts all night. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in nearly a year. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered, firm, low, and clipped with professional edge. Officer Ryan Shepherd. Ryan, it's Susan Clay, she said, her voice low. I think I have another one. There was a pause. Another stray. No, Susan said, glancing toward the hallway where Ellie and Luna had just left minutes ago. Another branded pup. German Shepherd, maybe 3 months. Same earmark. Same silent terror in her eyes. You remember that bust near Hawthorne Creek? Ryan's tone turned serious. I remember every detail. Officer Ryan Shepherd was in his early 30s, tall with an athletic build that made his dark police jacket seem molded to him. His hair was deep brown, cropped close at the sides, and his eyes, a steely gray blue, seemed to miss nothing. He had grown up in Willow Springs, the son of a local mechanic and a schoolteacher, and had returned after a few years in a bigger city, bringing with him experience and scars from a case that had gone cold too soon. "I'll stop by this afternoon," Ryan said. "You'll be there, I will." Later that day, as autumn leaves rustled in golden swirls along the sidewalks, Ryan parked his cruiser outside Susan's clinic. He stepped inside, giving the sleepy orange cat behind the desk a nod. Susan met him at the door, handing over Luna's intake sheet and guiding him to the back room where the pup now lay curled beside Ellie's coat. "She doesn't bark, unless frightened," Susan said. "But when she does, it's like she remembers something bad." Ryan crouched beside Luna, who raised her head, slowly, eyes alert but not panicked. "Hey there, sweetheart," he murmured. "You've been through something, haven't you?" He studied the faint tattoo, pulling out his phone to snap a picture. Same ink pattern, different code. "What does it mean?" Ellie asked from behind them, holding her sketchbook against her chest. Ryan stood and smiled gently. "It might help us find out where she came from, and who hurt her." Meanwhile, back at Martha's small house on Sycamore Lane, unease had started to settle in. Over the past 2 evenings, Ellie had noticed a man lingering across the street, a stranger in a navy windbreaker and a worn baseball cap, always just far enough away, not to be suspicious yet, close enough to unsettle. Luna had begun barking sharply every time he appeared, her small frame trembling, but determined to protect. Ellie had whispered her concern to Martha during breakfast. "I think someone's watching." Martha had tried to dismiss it at first. "People pass by, honey. Maybe he's just walking his route." But that afternoon, when the man reappeared, this time pretending to check his phone while glancing toward the front door, Martha locked the screen door and pulled the curtains tight. "I'll call Susan," she said. Susan, upon hearing the story, immediately relayed it to Officer Ryan when he arrived. "We might have someone sniffing around for Luna." Ryan's face hardened. "Any footage from the street doorbell cams, not on Sycamore," Susan said. "But there's a flower shop nearby with outdoor surveillance. I'll check it." True to his word, Ryan visited the shop where Mrs. Bellamy, the elderly, sprightly florist with a sharp memory and sharper tongue, welcomed him. "About time someone looked into the weirdos loitering round here," she muttered, guiding him to the back office. On the grainy footage, time-stamped 2 days ago, a man in a navy cap circled the neighborhood twice, each time pausing near Martha's gate. Not local, Ryan said, and definitely casing the place. Back at the precinct, he started a trace on the tag number of a dusty silver sedan seen in the video. Meanwhile, he made a note to follow up on a location that had haunted his files, Pet Paradise, a pet store on the outskirts of town, with a history too clean to be believable. Last year, anonymous tips had claimed the store was a front for moving trafficked dogs, but without evidence the case had been shelved. Now, with Luna's tattoo pointing toward the same patterns, Ryan felt the edges of something rotten surfacing again. He returned that evening to check on Luna. Ellie opened the door with Luna close behind her tail, swaying low but steady. "She barked again today," Ellie said quietly, "but only once." Was it the man Ryan asked? Ellie nodded. "I think Luna remembers him." He crouched to Luna's level, eye to eye. "You're a brave little girl," he said softly, "and we're going to keep you safe." That night, Luna slept curled beside Ellie's bed, her head resting on a folded flannel shirt. Ellie watched her until her own eyes drifted shut, her hand still resting on Luna's back. The moon over Willow Springs glowed a ghostly silver, casting long shadows over the rooftops and empty sidewalks of Sycamore Lane. It was the kind of night that tricked people into thinking everything was safe, wrapped in a blanket of silence and starlight. Inside the modest house at number 12, Martha had just turned off the bedside lamp, and Ellie lay curled up, a picture book forgotten, beside her pillow. At the foot of the bed, Luna, the 3-month-old German Shepherd pup, with her thick sable coat still damp from her evening bath, stirred lightly but did not sleep. Her amber eyes flicked toward the window. The room was warm, soft, with the scent of chamomile tea and old wood. Yet something in Luna's small, wiry frame had gone rigid. Then came the growl, low at first like a distant drumbeat, then louder, then sharper, until Luna barked a fierce rapid burst that shattered the night's illusion of peace. Martha sat bolt upright. "Ellie, I'm here, Grandma." Ellie yelped from her room. Within seconds, both were in the hallway. Luna stood with her fur-bristling tail stiff and paws planted squarely in front of the living room window. Her body blocked the space between the curtain and Ellie growling with surprising force for a dog her size. Martha's eyes went to the floor. "Is that—" Wet footprints. Smudged with clay and grit, the prints led from the back garden to the side window, stopping just beneath the ledge. The latch was still locked, but the impression was undeniable. Without a word, Martha reached for the cordless phone and dialed Ryan Shepherd. 20 minutes later, Ryan arrived, his cruiser lights-off flashlight in hand expression carved from stone. He crouched beside the window and examined the prints, his brow furrowing. "These are fresh," he said, running a hand along the sill. They didn't try to break in, but they were close. Martha, still in her housecoat, clutched the fabric tighter. "You think someone's looking for her?" "I don't think," Ryan said. "I know." He turned to Ellie, who stood clutching Luna's leash. Luna was now quiet, but her posture had not relaxed. The pup pressed herself close to the girl, eyes trained on every shadow. "I'm moving you both," Ryan said. "I've got a safe property near town, an old ranger station we used during wildfire season secured unlisted. No one will think to look." Martha hesitated, then nodded. "Now, pack essentials. I'll wait outside." As they moved quickly to gather clothes, food, and Luna's things, Martha's mind raced. She'd never imagined her old age would include secret evacuations and law enforcement escort. But then again, she had never imagined that a wounded puppy could change their lives so profoundly. The ranger station sat just outside Willow Springs, tucked between two ridges of pine trees. It was a squat stone building, with a tin roof and thick wooden shutters. Ryan had already opened it and stocked the fridge earlier that day, sensing this moment might come. By the time they arrived, it was near midnight. He helped Martha carry bags inside while Ellie explored the small living area, finding a faded armchair and a cot. Luna sniffed each corner before settling on a wool blanket near the fireplace. "I'll have patrols swing by every few hours," Ryan said, "and I'll come back at first light." "Thank you," Martha said sincerely, her voice heavy with fatigue. He looked toward Luna, who now rested her head on her paws, but didn't take her eyes off the door. She's small, but she's got the heart of a protector. Ellie knelt beside her. She knew Grandma, before anyone else. She felt the bad. Martha gently cupped the girl's shoulder. "That's why she found you." That night, sleep came in fits and starts. The wind howled around the station's eaves, but inside was warmth and quiet resolve. In the darkness, Luna woke once more, tail thumping faintly. She didn't bark this time. She only lifted her head, ears pricked, and waited. When she was sure no danger lurked, she curled closer to Ellie's cot and fell back asleep. The early morning mist clung to the hills around Willow Springs like a silk shawl, muffling the sound of tires crunching over gravel. The winding road led away from the town and into the hills past rows of sleeping apple orchards and abandoned barns until it opened to reveal a wide plateau where a cheerful red farmhouse stood surrounded by fenced pastures and a faded blue barn. It was here beneath the rustling branches of tall sycamores that Julia Shepherd lived, a woman whose laughter could carry through open windows and whose kindness filled the air like warm bread. Julia was in her early 40s, with wild auburn curls that defied any attempt at taming, and a wardrobe of denim overalls and flannel shirts in every color imaginable. Her freckled face was framed by wire-rimmed glasses, always smudged with paw prints or flour. Once, a pediatric nurse, Julia, had left hospital life behind after a personal loss. She rarely spoke of choosing instead to pour her heart into rescuing animals and growing vegetables. The loss had left her gentler, quieter in some ways, but also fiercely present, like someone who had learned the value of every breath. As the police SUV pulled up to the gate, she was already outside, waving with one hand and holding a steaming mug of tea in the other. Luna barked softly from the back seat, and Ellie, still wearing her bunny-patterned pajamas beneath a wool coat, peeked over the door with wide eyes. "This must be my guests." Julia grinned, approaching. "You must be Ellie, and this brave girl must be Luna." Ellie nodded and glanced at Ryan, who gave her an encouraging smile. Luna, cautious but curious, let Julia extend a hand to sniff. "You've got a good nose," Julia murmured, kneeling. "And a lion's heart, don't you?" The farmhouse was warm and cluttered in the cozy way that only homes built from love could be. Quilts draped over the backs of couches and sunbeams spilled across wooden floors, where a sleepy beagle and a leggy mutt already dozed. Julia's two rescue dogs, Milo and Peanut, were older, with graying muzzles, and the unbothered calm of dogs who had seen everything and worried about nothing. Luna took to the space slowly but surely. By afternoon, she was sniffing curiously around the kitchen table, while Julia served scrambled eggs and toast to Ellie and Martha. Ellie giggled as Luna chased a rubber ball across the hallway, her puppy energy reawakening in safety. While Luna and Ellie adjusted, Ryan pulled Julia aside. "We think they'll come looking again," he said quietly. "I trust you more than an empty ranger station." Julia nodded. "They're safe here. I've got cameras neighbors a mile off, and if anyone gets close, Peanut barks like a foghorn." Meanwhile, Susan and Ryan were working behind the scenes. Susan had proposed the idea a weekend free pet wellness clinic at her veterinary office, complete with flyers offering free checkups and vaccinations for all breeds, no questions asked. The bait was simple lure out the traffickers who needed to legitimize or treat sick animals, and cross-reference tattoo markings, microchips, or nervous behavior. It was a long shot, but a clever one. Back at the farm, Ellie blossomed like one of Julia's spring roses. She followed Julia everywhere, asking questions about wound care food ratios and calming techniques for frightened animals. One rainy afternoon, Julia sat the girl down beside a crate of foster kittens and showed her how to bottle feed them. "She listens," Julia told Martha later, "not just to instructions but to feelings." The animals trust her. Luna, in particular, had grown attached to Julia's routines. She waited at the door each morning for chores, trotted beside Julia during goat feeding, and even sat patiently while Julia checked the paws of a limping hen. But it was Ellie she returned to each night, curling beside her on the wide guest bed and resting her muzzle gently across the girl's knees. "I think Luna can feel her heart." Julia mused one evening watching them through the cracked door. Ellie was humming a song, her hand resting lightly on Luna's head. "She feels my dreams too." "What do you mean?" Martha asked gently. "Sometimes I dream of a forest," Ellie said. "It's raining, but it's not cold. Luna's always there. She's looking at me like she wants to tell me something, but not with words." Martha, seated by the fireplace, wrapped her shawl tighter. "That's a gift, sweetheart." "I think she remembers things she can't say," Ellie added, "but I feel them." As the week progressed, word about the upcoming pet clinic spread. Flyers went up at gas stations, feed stores, and bulletin boards across 3 counties. Julia posted it on local animal rescue forums, and Susan received a slow trickle of suspicious calls, men asking if German shepherds were welcome or if tattoos mattered. "Something's coming," Ryan said, phone pressed to his ear after one such call. "They're sniffing around. They're curious," Susan confirmed. "Which means they're nervous." Julia, meanwhile, began to suspect something deeper about Luna. One afternoon, as Ellie fell asleep beneath the willow tree in the yard, Luna stood guard without command, tail low, but alert ears twitching at every sound. A butterfly landed on her nose and she didn't flinch. "She's not just loyal," Julia whispered to Martha. "She's in tune, like she was meant for this family." On the final night before the clinic, Julia cooked a stew of lentils and thyme, and the air filled with the scent of rosemary and earth. Ellie sat with Luna beside the fire, brushing her with a small pink comb. Luna had gained weight her coat, now glossy, her ribs no longer visible beneath her fur. But her eyes still held a guarded glint, the memory of darkness not yet entirely forgotten. That night, as the stars blinked above the hills and the wind whispered through the apple trees, Luna rose from her place by Ellie's bed and walked to the window. She stared out into the night for a long time. Something was coming. But for the first time in her short, battered life, she wouldn't face it alone. Saturday dawned unusually warm for early spring, with a crisp breeze chasing golden light through the hills of Willow Springs. Outside the small veterinary clinic on Maple Street, rows of plastic chairs and tables had been set under a white canopy. A cheerful banner flapped in the wind, "Free Pet Wellness Day," sponsored by Willow Springs Animal Aid. It was a calculated kindness designed to appear ordinary, but behind each welcoming smile and clipboard was a quiet intensity like the hush before a hunt. Dr. Susan Clay stood at the check-in table wearing her usual tan scrubs and a navy windbreaker. Her hair, tied back in a loose bun, streaked with silver, shimmered under the morning sun. Beside her was Officer Ryan Maddox, dressed in plain clothes, a denim jacket, worn boots, and a dark baseball cap shadowing his sharp brown eyes. He looked like a local rancher more than a police officer, but the walkie clipped to his belt told another story. Behind the scenes, two other officers, Detective Cheryl Lang and Deputy Moore, watched from unmarked vehicles. Cheryl, a stocky woman with cropped black hair and quiet authority, had worked trafficking cases for nearly a decade. Moore, lean and always chewing gum, tapped his pen nervously against his knee. The entire operation relied on timing and on one particular visitor showing up. Julia arrived with Ellie and Martha around 10 a.m. Luna trotted beside Ellie on a short leash, her golden black fur now glossy, her amber eyes alert. Though still small at 3 months, Luna walked with surprising poise. She sniffed the air cautiously, occasionally glancing at Ellie for reassurance. Today was different. Ellie could feel it, though she couldn't say why. Luna's energy buzzed like static. Inside the clinic, locals streamed in, seniors with their beloved spaniels, young couples carrying boxes of curious kittens, farmhands leading in shepherds, and collies with weather-worn coats. Susan examined them all with steady hands and gentle praise. Yet her eyes never stopped scanning for a particular type of visitor, someone out of place, someone watching more than talking. By noon, the man appeared. He drove a black pickup truck, spotless and shining with vanity plates that read PPRZ1. His name was Dennis Crane, and he owned Pet Paradise, a facility on the outskirts of town that marketed itself as a high-end breeder. But those who knew better whispered about strange deliveries, locked sheds, and animals that disappeared from shelters only to reappear at marked-up prices under false identities. Crane was in his late 40s with neatly trimmed gray-blonde hair and tanned skin that looked more from sunbeds than sunlight. He wore designer sunglasses and a navy tracksuit with spotless white sneakers. Everything about him screamed manufactured charm. As he stepped from the truck, his smile was easy. "Heard there were free vaccines," he said, casually approaching Susan's table. Brought a couple of pups from the facility. Never hurts to check for fleas. Huh? Susan nodded, her tone professionally neutral. Name, Crane. Dennis Crane. From Pet Paradise. I run a little operation out west. Ryan's heart tightened. It was him. As Susan pretended to log his details, Ellie stood by the lemonade table with Julia. Luna was beside her tail, wagging low ears, back body tense. And then, without warning, Luna broke free. The leash slipped from Ellie's hand like a whisper. The pup dashed across the gravel lot, skidding slightly as she ran straight toward Crane. Everyone turned. Crane's smile vanished. "You," he blurted before he could stop himself. Luna stopped just out of reach, barking not wildly, but with purpose measured sharp. Her eyes locked on his unblinking. Crane reached into his pocket and with chilling familiarity pulled out a thin leather leash. Attached was a metal tag, her X92, scratched, dented, unmistakable. It was the same tag once hidden beneath Luna's matted fur. "You remember this, don't you?" he muttered, crouching. "Come on now, be a good." "But," Luna growled. A rustle in the distance. Then police hands where I can see them. Ryan was already moving his badge raised. Cheryl and Moore rushed in from either side. Crane stood frozen leash in one hand, the look of a man who knew the game was up. "You are under arrest for suspicion of animal trafficking, possession of stolen property, and obstruction of investigation," Cheryl said, cuffs already clicking around his wrists. "You set me up," Crane hissed toward Susan. She raised an eyebrow. "No, you walked into it yourself." As he was led away, Crane looked back at Luna, who now sat beside Ellie once more, tail curled around her legs, her face calm. The girl knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around the puppy's neck, whispering something only Luna would understand. "I knew it," Ryan said quietly, standing over the leash tag. "That number matches one from a previous bust. She's the thread we needed." "Not just a thread," Julia added. She was willing to face him. She chose to. Later, in the quiet aftermath, as folding chairs were packed and the last visitors left with their healthy pets, Ellie and Luna sat beneath a willow tree behind the clinic. The sun dappled through the branches. Ellie looked at Ryan, who approached with a soft smile. "You did something brave today," he said. "I didn't do anything," Ellie replied. Luna did. Ryan knelt beside them. She knew he'd be here. She knew what had to be done. "She didn't run," Ellie whispered, "even though she could have." "That's what courage looks like," Julia said from behind, her eyes misty. "It's not the biggest roar, it's the quiet heart that doesn't back down." Ellie looked at Luna and nodded. "Then she's the bravest heart I know." The wind stirred the grass around them. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked, but it was a bark of joy, not fear. And in the stillness something settled, justice, perhaps. Or maybe simply a soul beginning to heal. The spring sun returned to Willow Springs like an old friend, warming sidewalks and coaxing daffodils from their beds along Main Street. The stormy weeks were behind them now, but the story of one brave puppy still lingered on every porch and cafe table like a tale passed from heart to heart. Outside the town hall, a small wooden sign had been newly nailed beside the bench, Luna's Corner, a place of safety and kindness. It was more than just a bench. It was a promise. Inside the clinic, Dr. Susan Clay adjusted the nameplate on the office door to include a new laminated sign beneath it. Therapy dog. Certified companion, Luna. She smiled faintly, adjusting her glasses as Luna sat at her feet, tail thumping gently. The once frail German Shepherd puppy now looked confident and alert, though still small for her age, barely 4 months old, her ears finely standing upright and her coat shining like brushed bronze in the light. "Official now," Susan said, glancing at Officer Ryan Maddox, who stood at the doorway, arms crossed with quiet pride. He had shed the weight of recent stress, though the dark crescents beneath his eyes spoke of late nights. His uniform jacket was draped casually over one arm. She passed every check. Temperament, obedience, even empathy. Ryan nodded. I don't think I've ever seen a dog score that high in emotional recognition. It's like she already knows what people need. She does, said a soft voice. Ellie entered the clinic wearing a light denim dress with a ladybug pin on the collar. Her dark blonde hair was half-tied, and freckles dotted her cheeks. In one hand she held a small clipboard, in the other Luna's leash. Behind her was Martha wearing a green cardigan and smiling from ear to ear. Luna helped me talk in front of the class today, Ellie announced. I told them how she found me, not the other way around. Susan crouched beside Luna. That's a story worth telling. And I want to keep telling it, Ellie said, more seriously than any 6-year-old had business sounding. I want other kids to know that small voices still matter. Ryan exchanged a glance with Susan, then looked at Martha, who stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Ellie's shoulder. She's made up her mind, Martha said, her voice tinged with amusement and awe. The school counselor wants her to speak at assembly next week. Something about emotional intelligence and compassion. I suppose I'll be the nervous chaperone. Not the first time this girl changed hearts, Susan said warmly. As the adults talked, Luna nudged Ellie's hand and looked up at her as if to say, "We've got this." Ellie smiled and knelt to stroke the puppy's fur. She doesn't like loud clapping, but she's okay with gentle hugs. Later that afternoon, they walked down to Willow Park, where volunteers and townsfolk had gathered for a small community event, the unveiling of a new outreach initiative against illegal pet trade. Banners fluttered booths, offered pamphlets and treats for both humans and animals, and a small stage had been set near the pond decorated with wildflowers and paw-print garlands. Ryan took the stage first. Standing tall in his khaki uniform, he began, "We often think heroes wear badges, but today we honor one who wears a tail and a collar." The crowd chuckled softly. She came to us afraid and wounded, but in that small frame beat the heart of someone who wouldn't run when it mattered. Luna exposed a cruel network, protected a child, and reminded us all that love is not measured in size, but in spirit. He motioned toward Ellie and Martha, who walked up hand in hand. Luna followed, pausing every few steps to glance around, tail wagging. When Ellie lifted a small certificate high above her head, the crowd clapped gently. Luna barked once sharp-proud and then settled beside Ellie, curling her tail neatly around her paws. After the applause, a woman approached from the crowd, a teacher named Miss Harper, in her late 30s, with wavy dark hair and a calm smile. She had heard Ellie's story and wanted to invite her to speak at neighboring schools. She knelt beside Luna and said, "You've already started something beautiful." Behind the booths, Julia helped pass out dog treats and handmade collars she'd sewn herself. "If this town's going to be famous for anything," she said with a grin, "let it be kindness." By sunset, the park glowed golden. Ellie sat on the bench newly dedicated to Luna, her legs swinging slightly above the ground. Martha sat beside her, knitting something in her lap. Luna rested at their feet, eyes half-closed, ears still twitching at the sound of laughter and breeze. Ryan and Susan stood nearby, quietly discussing future investigations and proposals for stronger town legislation. But their words faded into the soft hum of the moment, into a calm that had been hard-earned. Ellie leaned against her grandmother. "I think Luna was sent to us." Martha looked up from her knitting. "I think you found each other. And maybe that's how miracles really work." Luna raised her head, sensing something: a boy dropping his ice cream, a toddler crying, someone laughing too loudly, but then settled again, assured that all was well. Her job wasn't over, but for now it was enough. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest prayers. A trembling whimper beneath a rain-soaked dumpster led not only to the rescue of a helpless puppy, but to the healing of an entire town. Through Luna's eyes, we saw what it means to be chosen by grace, not because we're strong, but because love makes us brave. Ellie didn't have wealth or power, only a heart that listened, and that was enough. This story reminds us that God often answers prayers through unexpected messengers, a child, a puppy, a stranger with a kind hand. Miracles are not always grand. Sometimes they curl up at your feet and trust you with their brokenness. In our everyday lives, there are countless Luna's souls overlooked, hurting, and waiting for someone to see them. Will you be the one to kneel down, to listen, to choose love? If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who believes in second chances. Comment. Amen if you believe that God still works through small miracles. Subscribe for more true stories of hope and healing, and may the Lord bless you for every kindness, seen or unseen.